Hello, and welcome to another episode of Coffee Break Blogging. Now, this welcome back is actually as much for me as it may be for you, probably even more so because I actually haven't recorded a episode of this podcast in about a month. Now, that's because I was on a long trip. So all the episodes that you guys have gotten in the last few weeks, 4 weeks specifically, were recorded over a month ago, and then I went on vacation with my family. So my intention was to keep it on schedule. Now, I did have a little hiccup apparently while I was gone, and I apologize for that. So basically what happened was that iTunes was not updating properly from the podcast feed from the Blog Marketing Academy website. I know why now. It was basically the feed was just too darn big, actually. So I had to fix it from the RV. But long story short, we had 3 or 4 weeks where the podcast was not being properly updated in iTunes. And when I found out about that, I was actually up in New Hampshire at the time, and I was like, "You've got to be kidding me." And so I had to drop everything right there in a campground, tethered to my iPhone for internet service, and fix the bad boy. And I did. We got it up and running. But that brings me to the trip. So I have not recorded an episode. I got to get back into the groove of things because we were gone for about a month on a long RV trip with my family. Went up to the New England area for the entire time. Left Florida, drove north. We went into Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The New York City area, went from there up into Boston, went way around Boston because I don't want to get anywhere near it with an RV, went up into Maine, actually. We didn't actually plan to do that, but we've got, my father-in-law lives in Maine, and so we went up there to see him, and beautiful, beautiful area, especially in the summer. They can keep their winters, though, just saying. From Maine, we went over to New Hampshire, went into I think it's called the White Mountain area, went up top Mount Washington, crossed Vermont, went into New York, went to Watkins Glen, the gorge there, beautiful, beautiful area. And then went from there over to Niagara Falls, and then went south again back home. So we were gone quite some time, and in theory, the podcast was supposed to keep on going the entire time, except for that little technical faux pas. But actually, what I just told you speaks to what we're going to be talking about today, because I put out episodes in advance so that the show would remain on schedule while I was gone. And episode 105, which is the most recent one that came out, talks about why you should plan your content well in advance. Something that I did do because I wanted to maintain that schedule while I was away out in the RV. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat all the reasons why you should plan your content in advance. What I want to do at this point, now that I'm back in the chair, get myself warmed up again for podcasts, is I want to talk about how to actually go about it. Okay, so how do you go about actually putting forth a calendar and planning your content in advance so that you can have some rhyme or reason to your content so you can get more traffic and actually plan proper promotions? So I'm going to share with you a 6-step process that I've outlined. And it's definitely a bird's eye view kind of a thing, but we're going to go ahead and run through this. Step 1 is to first list out any campaigns or launches that you intend to do. Now, this gets into the business side of things, but this is called the Blog Marketing Academy. So we are jumping ahead a little bit here in terms of the business side of things. And that's stuff that's coming up in the future here on Coffee Break Blogging, is getting into the monetization and the money making. But assuming that you've got some of that going on right now, I want you to list out any campaigns or launches that you intend to run in the time frame that you're planning. Now, if you don't have any money making stuff going on quite yet, then maybe you can come up with one. Or you could possibly still come up with some marketing campaigns that are there for the purpose of helping you get traffic. So, for example, maybe you want to run a contest of some kind. And so let's say you're planning your calendar out for the next 3 months. You would look forward into the next 3 months and you would say, well, in month 2, I think it might be a good thing for me to run a contest. And so that you would put on your list of campaigns to run. But if you are selling anything, maybe you want to run a sale, maybe you're planning your 4th quarter and you see Thanksgiving, Black Friday coming up and Christmas, and you want to run obviously some campaigns around those times, Put those on your calendar because it will affect the content that you create during those timeframes. Now, once you've got your campaigns or your launches on the calendar, I want you to go to step 2, which is to list out any general ideas that you want to pursue over this next time period. Now, what I mean by that is you just look at your blog and your business with a bird's eye viewpoint, and anything that you think that you need to cover or do a better job of, I want you to plan for this in your content. So let's say that you want to get into doing webinars and you've never done a webinar before, but you've got to do that first one. So you might be looking at the calendar for the next quarter and say, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a webinar. Great. Put it on the calendar for the next quarter, okay? Let's say that you want to cover a particular topic and do it with more completeness so that you can rank for it in Google and stuff like that. Just a pure themed content. Great. Put that on your calendar so that you will actually know that during a couple of weeks, you're primarily going to be talking about one topic, and all of your content surrounds that one topic. You put that on the calendar, okay? So at this point, we've got your marketing, your campaigns, any launches or sales on the calendar. We also have a general theme to some of the content that you're going to be putting onto the calendar. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to look at the calendar coming up that you're planning for and see if there are any holidays or any events coming up that you might want to run some type of a promo for or any other type of campaign. So I already mentioned earlier the idea of Christmas or Thanksgiving, real obvious. If you're in business of some kind, you're probably going to want to run some kind of a sale, but it could also be made up holidays. Let's say the anniversary of your blog, maybe your birthday. It doesn't really matter what it is. You can totally make them up. But if there's any holidays or special events coming up in your niche during the time frame that you're planning, you might want to have that on your calendar so that you can plan content around it. Okay? Step 4 is to get out your call to action map. Now, we haven't talked too much about this. It's a tool that I came out with. It's essentially a mind map. And it's a mind map of potential calls to action that you can run inside your content. And these calls to action could be for any of your products. It could be an affiliate product. It could be as simple as to post a comment or to retweet something. Doesn't really matter. Opt into your list, get a particular lead magnet. It's just a mind map of potential calls to action. Now, in this step, all you're doing is compiling that and having it in front of you because you're going to want to reference these potential calls to action when you create your content. I believe I've mentioned it before in the Coffee Break Blogging series that all content should end and probably have interlaced within calls to action. It should have a call to action, and you need to know what that call to action is going to be before you create your content so that it jives properly, so that the content actually leads up to what you want them to do when they're done. So you need to know what those calls to action are, and if you're unclear about it, then have the call to action map handy. Step 5. Starting with your major campaigns or events as your focus points, I want you to begin mapping out your content releases around those dates. So what I'm saying, let's put it into other words. Everything that we've made a list of, your campaigns, your launches, any general themes, any holidays coming up, all the things we've mentioned already, now I want you to actually pop those things onto your editorial calendar, and I want you to map out some content to go around it. Okay. Now, let's say you're doing a timed promotion. Let's say you're going to run a 3-day sale and you see it coming up on your calendar in 2 weeks. Great. You might want to have blog content, maybe even a YouTube video that mentions the 3-day sale. If you're running a podcast, you would want to make sure that whatever episode is coming out around that time period is going to mention your 3-day sale. Okay. That's why you want to do it this way. You might even have, if you're going to be running a launch, you might even have pre-launch content on your blog. Okay. So you knowing that that launch is there is going to definitely affect your editorial calendar during that time frame. And so you need to know what's coming up in your calendar. And then you need to sit down at this point and you need to map out the content that's going to go on your blog or your videos or your podcast during that time frame. Now, the last step here is that typically you're not going to be in constant marketing mode. And so even when you put things on your calendar around these promotions, these campaigns, maybe even any themes that you want to tackle, you're probably still going to have some gaps on your timeline. Now, a lot of this is going to depend on how often you typically post. If you have a pretty low posting schedule, like maybe once a week, once every couple weeks, which is there's nothing wrong with that, then you might not have these gaps. Or you might not even care. But if you do have typically a more frequent posting schedule on your blog, then you're probably going to have these gaps where you don't really have any promotion going on, no particular marketing campaign going on, but you don't want to just be quiet. Okay. So if that case, you want to identify those gaps in your timeline and you want to purposely fill them in with things that serve a purpose. Okay. So let's say that you had a week coming up on month 2 of your calendar and you're like, well, I don't really have any particular marketing campaign going on right there. Great. So you look at your blog from a strategic standpoint and you will plan content that fills some kind of a need during that time frame to fill the gap. And this could be just content on a topic that you want to make sure you've got covered really well on your site. You could answer an audience question that you get a lot so that you can refer to that blog post rather than type out the answer in your email. It could be strictly a relationship builder where you post something to your blog and the entire purpose of it is to get engagement or to survey your audience and find out something that you might be able to help them with later. Whatever it might be, but you use those gaps in your calendar and you put them in there around the other things that you need to get done. Okay. So that's a basic 6-step process on planning out your editorial calendar. Now, the next thing I want to mention here before we end off this episode is how do we do it in terms of the actual tools? Now, what I have done in the past was I actually used a spreadsheet and I would keep it on Google Drive. And it would just simply be a bunch of columns there. And the columns would be like the date that I intend to publish it, what format it is, whether it's video, podcast, blog post, whatever. I'd have the headline there, maybe some keywords that I intend to target with that blog post, a deadline for me to actually have it completed, things like that. And it was just basically columns that I would set up in a spreadsheet. It was nothing very fancy. Okay, so that's a real down and dirty way to manage an editorial calendar. Now, there are also plugins for WordPress, such as one that's aptly named Editorial Calendar. Now, last I looked at the Editorial Calendar plugin, it basically just showed your blog post on the calendar, including drafts. So it wasn't ideal in that there wasn't any additional fields to go along with it where you could talk with your team or manage steps to be done on that blog post or anything like that. It was just kind of a general, calendar view of your blog post, which is definitely better than nothing. And it's called the Editorial Calendar plugin. Now, another one that I'm going to share with you, and I have mentioned it before, is a company called CoSchedule. Now, CoSchedule, these are guys that I use, and they're used to plan out, pre-plan social media shares of your content in advance to go along with your blog post. But I just recently saw that they've made some changes to their system that allows you to actually use CoSchedule as a full-blown editorial calendar solution, which means that you can actually plan content on there. You can and basically have your content, your social shares, and all kinds of stuff all on the same calendar managed with CoSchedule. So I'm actually very quickly going to look into utilizing this. Like I said, I'm already using CoSchedule, so now I just need to look into the new features and see how I might be able to use it. But you need to find the solution that works best for you. I happen to know that many people simply use a spreadsheet for this, and it works just fine. If you have a wall calendar, you could use that too. You could literally write your blog post right there on a wall calendar. I know some people who've gone out to an Office Depot store or whatever, Staples, whatever, and they'll get one of those whiteboards that have the calendar printed on it. And then you can just use a dry erase marker and literally just draw out your editorial calendar in advance on the whiteboard. And then the next month you erase it and do it for the next month. So that's another way to do it. I've seen other people who will get these big desk pads that, where there are multiple sheets of paper, and usually people will put them on their desk and maybe jot little notes on them here and there. Well, you can get those things that have calendars pre-printed on them. Okay. And then I've seen people who will actually rip every page off of that thing, all 12 of them for the year, paste these big calendars, not paste, but probably tape or something, up on their wall. So they literally have their entire year in advance sitting up on their wall with these calendars. And then that's how they plan their content well in advance. So it's actually a kind of a cool idea. Just get one of these little desk pads with a calendar printed on the whole darn thing. Put them all, 12 of them, up on your wall, and then start rocking it out with some Post-it notes or whatever it is that you want to do, okay? So that is some information I hope you found useful on how to develop your editorial calendar. Here's the thing. The big boys do it this way. The serious people, the people who make good money doing this, they do plan their content out in advance. The neophytes, the newbies, they tend to fly by the seat of their pants. And so you need to ask yourself, which do you want to be? Do you want to remain in the newbie neophyte category where you're really not seeing that much result from your content marketing? Or do you want to play a big boy game? If you want to play a big boy game, I highly recommend that you get started planning out your content in advance. You might not plan it out a year in advance. Start out with a few weeks, and then you can get better at it over time. Okay, so that's episode 106 of Coffee Break Blogging. I will see you next time, where we're going to talk about monetization and how it has everything to do with our traffic to our site. I'll see you then.